All right. Hello, everyone. We're here again down in my basement this week. So this is week 7's lecture, and this week's lecture is actually pretty short. The stuff that we'll do in class is probably a little bit more involved. It's kind of a little bit more complex using design options. But the actual lesson that's associated with that is just kind of the introduction to not necessarily design options, but just thinking about Revit projects as something more than just the kind of immediacy of the design that you see in front of you. When you pair what Revit does as far as being able to change your document or your representation of your project with kind of parametric ideas, you can really have kind of a powerful combination. So the example in the lecture, if you read the lecture notes as well, they showed an example of somebody trying to use parametric ideas to kind of create a variable system that they can, if say you're trying to do the cost on something, or you're trying to build the design but you don't know what the actual owner's cost constraint is going to be, you can build a system that's flexible and you can actually come up with this cost really quickly for them. So once you find out that constraint, you can quickly adjust your design and kind of have a feel for that. So I've set up a little example here of kind of the same idea. The example that they talk about in the lecture is probably much more sophisticated than what I have here, but this shows what you can kind of do, thinking about the Revit model as kind of a parametric design machine, if you will, that you can create lots and lots of variables. Because of the parametric nature of it, you can create a variety of choices, but you set up your project to report back things that are important to you. So in this case, the cost of the building. So I've set up my project here, and I have this, basic little box with, say, this, arched glass entry, and we don't know how much the cost is on that thing, or we don't know exactly how much our client maybe wants to budget for that. So I set something up that, and I'm only doing the mullions here. So I drew my building, but I also I created a schedule view of my project that's basically counting up every single mullion that is in this item here, or in my curtain wall. So there are however many items here. And notice I have this thing, cost of mullion, included here. Well, there's a length parameter, so we're figuring out how long each item is. And then I have a field in here that's been hidden that's actually cost per linear foot. And so then a formula. So if I look at this, let me show that real quick. So I have the family, so that's this. The length of it is what I care about. Then the cost, which is a parameter that I've hidden in here, because that's really just a number that I'm using to calculate this cost of mullion, which is the length times whatever the cost per linear foot is. So now this schedule is ready to report back to me what the cost of the mullions within my design currently are. So if I went into this project and I select, and use tab here to select one of my mullions, there I'm on a curtain grid, there I'm on a panel, there I have the mullion itself. So if I select a mullion and I go and edit the type of this, so cost happens to be a type parameter for this. So let's see what the cost. So the cost is here, and I'll put in some number. The number that I'm using doesn't matter. I don't know how much a mullion actually costs. The idea that I'm able to calculate it is what's important. So if you were really working on this project, you would know how much a mullion costs, and you would know how much each one of those panel costs per square foot, or however they're going to measure it. So let's just say the cost of this mullion, this 2.5 by 5 inch rectangular mullion, is $15 per linear foot. So I'm just putting in a number 15 here. It knows it's going to be dollars, so it automatically puts because this parameter type is set to be currency, so it knows to make it into 15.00. So now when I say okay, now all of a sudden I have the cost of this mullion. So a mullion that is 4'8" by 4'8" long is going to cost me $70.57. And then this schedule is also taking all of the mullions together and then totaling them up, so I have a total cost of $3,000 for this particular layout. So if I did something like this, if I select that thing and maybe I make the radius bigger. Maybe I make it to be a 12-foot radius, right? And I change that. All of a sudden, I've changed my configuration. My mullions are different, and if I go and look, now this costs $3,055. So now I know I've just shaved $800 off of it. But it looks kind of wonky because I have a funny radius, so let's put it back to the whatever it was, or I'll just undo that and then I'll go back to what it was. That looks better. And so now I have this machine, or this kind of way of checking to see if I'm meeting my budget constraints as I'm working on the project. So I can not only evaluate this project on what it looks like aesthetically and how I want the design to read, but I can also start building in these other constraints like cost, which are real world things. So I can maybe look at something like, okay, so now I know how much each mullion costs. What if I changed the spacing on these mullions? Instead of doing a 5x8 panel, what if I wanted that to be equal? What if aesthetically I wanted a 4x4 panel instead? Okay. And now I'll say okay to that. And so now it changes the look of this. And now I know that a 4x4 panel costs $5,000 instead of $3,800. So now I have something to be able to start evaluating this design on something more than just how it looks. And how much it costs is a real world thing. But having a tool like Revit that gives me the variability, and as long as I know what I'm looking for, I can build something like this to kind of capture that variability. So, like I said, the lecture actually goes on to expand on this idea that I happen to be doing it all in one option right here. But Revit has a way of building a project in such a way that you can simultaneously have a front end that looks like this, as well as a front end that maybe I have a different wall that instead of this arc one, maybe it's this wall instead that does this, and I want to evaluate that separately from the arc wall. So now I'm getting all kinds of mullions in my schedule. So now I've probably got $10,000 worth of mullions in my schedule, 13,000. So I'd have to come in here and I'd have to take that out to see this. Right now I can decide, is that better than my other one? You could the 4x4 panel reads better in this one, maybe I could say. And does it cost more? Well, it costs, this is $8,000 compared to the other one that was $5,000. So the arc was less money. And I mean, some of these things you kind of logically know these things. You could probably kind of figure out that an 8x5 panel as compared to a 4x4 panel is going to cost more, or in that case less, I suppose. But having the actual numbers can give you something more tangible to kind of work with and work within. So you can go, I really like that square appearance, but the 4x4 is going to cost too much. What if we did something like this? Maybe we just slightly alter it and we make it, instead of 4x4, we go 5x5. How much is that going to save us? Because I can get the same look, but now I'm reducing the overall mullion lengths if I go to a 5x5 panel. And now I've saved myself $1,000 or whatever. So having this kind of variability and this kind of machine that can calculate this kind of stuff is nice. And of course, you can have these schedules can be sitting here waiting for items to appear, right? If I had my project that I don't have any mullions in it, right? So I've taken all of them out. So this schedule is here waiting. It's not populated with anything at all. But as soon as I put something in that has that object type, that category, so I put in a storefront wall, as soon as I put it in and place it in here, and maybe I'll do the other side as well. As soon as I place that item in, now all of a sudden I have this information. So you can imagine if you were tracking this for an entire building and all of the components and pieces that are in your building, then that's going to be a piece of information that you as the designer can take to your owner and it can be really useful in having that conversation, that initial conversation with, how the design is going or what the what you're projecting costs to be. And is this going to be 100% right? Well, over time you'll get better at guessing this kind of stuff and this information. So, early on, maybe it's only as good as the information that you put into it. So, but the idea is that you develop your skills at doing this kind of thing, and you have that at your disposal. So very early on, as early as I've drawn 6 walls into a project, you can begin to share with your owner what the estimated cost is going to be. And of course, as your design gets refined, that number gets more refined. But having that information ahead of time can be really, really valuable to the owner. So thinking about how Revit can give you the ability to do this kind of thing is, it's a very powerful kind of concept to think about as you design your projects and as you use the tool as a professional. So, like I said, this is a really short lecture. There's not a lot to it. There's much more as far as getting design options to work and showing you how design options to work. Get that out of my face. Getting design options to work and how we set that up in a project. There's much more to that. So when we do the hands-on in class, I'll talk more about this kind of, breaking it down as far as cost, because it's a pretty effective way to illustrate how design options you can see the effects of them, not just aesthetically or how the design works, but how it actually impacts the building itself. So I'll expand on it a little bit so you can understand how that works and how we set up 2 different options within the same project inside of Revit, and how we can have model objects that are kind of exist in both places. So that's it for this week. 10-15 minutes, whatever it was. I don't know how long it was. Wasn't too terribly long. So I hope everybody enjoys the lecture. Have a good week. We'll see you in class. Thanks.